To describe the emoji, it's the emoji that's just like that.
Oh, for the listeners? It's a teeth clenched emoji. It's the I'm not on Lexapro emoji.
Yeah, you're smiling, but your like lips are up. They're like,
Yeah, it's like I have an undiagnosed anxiety disorder, which is partly what accounts for my edge in comedy.
Hey, podcast starters. My name is Marcos Gonzalez, and this is Inside the Funny or Die Vault. We're going to take a look back at classic Funny or Die videos and talk internet comedy and culture from then to now. Today's guest is an Academy Award nominated writer and comedian whose work has appeared in The New Yorker, The Daily Show, and of course BORAT 2 or BORAT subsequent movie film. She is also the creator and host of the true crime story Indefensible on AMC Plus. Jena Friedman, welcome to the Funny or Die Vault.
Thank you for having me. I don't know why I waved to the, I guess there's going to be a couple people watching also.
So I have a ton of questions for you, but before we jump into that, we're going to talk about the video you chose, which was Billy on the Street with David Letterman.
Hey guys, it's Billy Eichner from Billy on the Street. I'm out here with the new host of E's Fashion Police, David Letterman. We all know The Late Show has been a big breakout role for Dave, so we're about to hit the streets and ask New Yorkers what Dave's next move should be. You ready, Dave?
I am.
Let's go, Miss David Letterman. David Letterman, the man's been entertaining you for 40 years. What have you ever done?
What am I supposed to do?
Yeah, well, that's David Letterman.
Hi, lovely to meet you.
Lovely to meet you.
You know,
A lot of yelling, a lot of fun, a lot of crazy questions, and of course David Letterman, classic comedy legend who joined him. Why did you choose this video? What was your favorite part?
I love Billy on the Street.
Of course.
I worked for Dave Letterman. I thought the video was not only funny, but it showed a side of Dave that I think people who know and love him don't often see, which is him out of his element and possibly a little awkward, which I think awkwardness is what I like in comedy, and kind of cinema verite, like reality is what I like in comedy. So I thought it was a really good video, not just for the comedy of it, but also just because it showed a side of someone that you typically, or I typically didn't see, even having worked with him.
Yeah, the sort of unpredictability of like being off script.
Yeah.
What about Billy on the Street was something that you like, that you gravitated toward?
I mean, he's so funny and he's so quick, and I also love New York and I love New Yorkers, and I think it wasn't just funny, it was holding a mirror up to everyday New Yorkers and how they would actually react, which is a lot of times just like running away from someone who's throwing their comedy in your face. And I hate that it makes me laugh to see like women running away in fear, but that actually just organically makes me laugh, knowing that they're safe.
Yeah.
But yeah, I always get a kick out of Billy on the Street videos. And if you've done comedy for so long, you do have like a kind of deadness inside. So when something actually genuinely makes me laugh, it's really cool.
Yeah, and I think like both of us are comedians, like normally talking in that way is totally fine, but I think the anxiety of two famous people yelling at you scares anybody.
Yeah, or just two men. I mean,
Or two men as well, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think this video was pretty funny. It was like funny to watch. You could see Dave like, he was genuinely enjoying it, which is refreshing. When I was working at Letterman, he was kind of checked out. I would liken it to like Weekend at Bernie's, which I don't know if these are references that your audience knows anymore, so maybe Google it. But just someone who's kind of like dead, and you have to prop them up and make them look alive.
Hold them up, make them dance, yeah.
Yeah, I think, and Dave would probably agree that at least around 2011 when I was there, he was a little checked out. So it was nice to see him in a context where he was like excited and on his feet and actually engaged and thinking like, how can I be funny too? It was nice to kind of see someone who's like such a veteran trying to actually work.
Yeah, and I think in that video, it was like talking about next steps, because I think it must have been towards the end of Letterman. Did he know, or did you guys know what he was doing next? Was it all kind of like a mystique, like mysterious?
I mean, I don't think that there was any. I left before he retired. I was there 2011, 2012. Maybe he retired in 2013. I have to Google it, but so I would just imagine. I mean, he'd been doing that show for so long that it wasn't like, what am I gonna do next? I think a lot of like those comedy legends who retire, it's like, oh, I want to retire to spend time with my family, and then they realize I don't. Good. No,
Yeah.
and then they realize I don't like their family. No.
Like the
I'm
Conans of it all,
teasing.
they're
I
like-
don't. I'm sure he loves his family. But people realize like, oh, like this platform that I got was so something that gave me so much joy. I want to go back to it. But I don't think when people like retire at Dave's level, they're thinking, I'm going to go do a podcast now. I think he was just thinking, I'm going to take a break.
No, I think there's like this itch you need to scratch, right? Like it's gone, and then you're like, it's like when an athlete leaves. They're like, I still want to do something in basketball. You know what I mean? Like Conan left, now he's back doing a million things. Like there's always that thing you want to do. So sort of parlaying this into your career. So you've done a lot of interviewing everyday people. What were things that you learned on the job about like making situations funny, like finding that right interview or finding that right person?
Yeah, I've done some man on the streets with everyday people, but I do tend to gravitate towards like creepy men. That's like a lot of who I've interviewed.
Yeah.
Like, so what I pick is my favorite interview subject, if it's depending on the context. Sometimes it's just someone who can explain something that I'm really trying to understand. Like on the true crime show, it's like if you can explain like how this guy got away with definitely killing someone, I want to know. But other times it's just someone who maybe has a reputation and then trying to show a side of them that isn't presented in the media. I think that's always really interesting, to try to kind of peel away at misperceptions people might have of them. That's always like really exciting, and to be able to do, and to do it with comedy is great.
What is the hardest part of like doing these sort of things in the field, both on and like comedy side and obviously like the sort of true crime drama side? I guess for each, what's like the hardest part of like finding these people or finding that story or finding the thing you want to sort of tackle?
The hardest part about that is, if you have a good team, it's easy. So if you have a team of like researchers and people who understand your point of view, and there are so many stories out there that you can hook into. The hardest part is booking the right people, making sure you can book people, and that, especially like in a true crime context, like making sure it's like ethical. You get permission from victims' families, and that like you're telling stories that are actually moving the needle in some way, or either providing people with closure after something has happened, or trying to highlight an injustice rather than just being like gratuitous and showing people something just to keep them watching TV,
I feel like comedy's kind of similar too, right?
In terms of,
You're always trying to find that sort of like thing that keeps everybody sort of hooked in, like.
It's less like thoughtful of like how to be funny. Like when I was at The Daily Show and I was a field producer there for Jon's last 3 years that he was there.
Oh, sick.
It was like we can figure out what you care about, and then we can find a way to make it funny. And that's kind of ever since then, and even before then, how I've kind of done what I do. It's like, and it's not always easy, but when the passion and the interest is there, you can figure it out. Like I remember we did a piece about the opioid crisis in like 2014 or 15 for The Daily Show, and Michael Che, it was like a short-lived moment when he was a correspondent there, and obviously there's nothing funny about that. It's heart-wrenching, but the take was we parodied The Insider, but with the pharmaceutical companies. So Che was like doing this story, and then he was like all of a sudden like afraid of being like chased and killed by the pharmaceutical industry. La la la. It's not that funny, but it was like a good segment. And I will say one thing I really wish I had done, to your point, and this is just a tip, when you're sitting down with someone, you want to just be rolling right when they come in. Not for this interview, hopefully this isn't like a gotcha interview.
No.
But when you're like interviewing people, you just want the cameras on, because we interviewed somebody who had written articles extolling the benefits of opioids and saying that they're good for. Isn't this like, as I'm telling this, I'm very self-aware that this isn't like funny, but
It's really interesting though.
it was, he was writing papers about how opioids are good for chronic pain, and he had a knee surgery recently, and he sat down and I said, "Are you on opioids now?" And he said, "I wouldn't touch the stuff." And he had just had a knee surgery, and I didn't get that on camera, and I wish I had.
Dang.
But what we did get on camera was him saying that opioids are good for like, chronic pain, which they're they just aren't. I don't know if I should be quoted as saying this because I'm not a doctor, but whatever. We have an opioid crisis, and a lot of the reason why is overprescribing opioids for chronic pain and for pain. So the guy said opioids are great for chronic pain, and then Che goes, and it's not like anyone's paying you to say that, and then the guy's face dropped, and he was like, yeah, I'm being funded by blah, 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 blah.
Oh, no.
And so that was like the kind of money shot that made the
Ay-yi-yi.
piece, even if it wasn't the funniest piece, it had like a gravitas and like there was like this moment where you're like, oh wow, this is kind of partly how this epidemic happened, because you have these paid shills essentially lying to people or
so wild.
misrepresenting how dangerous these drugs can be.
Yeah. So just to because I want to rewind and figure out sort of your trajectory of how you got to all these places, because it went, so it was like Letterman, Daily Show, eventually BORAT. How did you?
Well, before Letterman,
before Letterman.
I went to college in Chicago. I did improv in Chicago. I have a book that came out last year called Not Funny, where I talk all about how I got into comedy.
Oh, cool.
But my first project was a satire on American Girl dolls. It was called The Refugee Girls Review, and it was like a Garbage Pail Kid version of American Girl. And we had these, before I wrote this musical parody of American Girl, we actually had these dolls, kind of like a fake American Girl doll catalog. And the segments, I don't know if they would still hold up, but Funny or Die put them on the website.
Oh, no way.
Yeah. So
That's sick.
I hope they're not offensive now, but it was making fun of the American Girl industry and the whitewashing of American Girl. Had this whole line of dolls, which I think are now being phased out. It was all these. It started out as this really cool company with historical dolls that each came with a book that would teach little girls about history. And then when Mattel bought American Girl, it just became each doll just came with there was a Depression era doll that came with a broom that cost me more than a real one. The only black doll in the collection was a runaway slave.
Oh my
who,
God.
And then you'd go to the American Girl doll store, and there was a play and a t-shirt, and I think they still have all this.
Oh, they do. I weirdly know. My little sister was obsessed with American Doll, and the one time we went to New York, we had to stand in that insane line to get whatever toy. And I weirdly have a connection to this because a year ago I was doing a UCB show, and someone had mentioned that it was maybe it was a year or two ago, was the first time they'd had an Asian American doll. Period. The first time.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
Oh wow.
And she was a ski girl who lived in Colorado. It was really goofy, but they were priding themselves on this is the first time we did this. And I was now 2022
Yeah, I mean, I heard about American Girl because I was in college, and the doll of 2005, in her backstory, she fled her dangerous neighborhood of Pilsen and moved to Downers Grove. And Pilsen is a very proud Mexican-American neighborhood in Chicago, and the people of Pilsen were like, fuck this. And so they protested
They gave them
American Girl for just, whitewashing this girl's narrative and making Pilsen look bad or something. And so I was like, oh, this is really funny. And so then I went to the store, and I was like, oh my God, this is ridiculous. And now I think that they're actually phasing out the historical dolls because girls just want dolls that look just like them. They want to IVF their own dolls, which is a whole other thing. But yeah, that world was just ripe for comedy and satire in that moment. And yeah, Funny or Die put the sketches up, or they were a visual kind of.
So that was your first thing post college that was I'm
that
pursuing
play,
comedy now. Yeah.
That play was the first thing. I did it in Chicago. I talked about this in the book, but we got 1 star in Time Out Chicago. They called it the worst comedic attempt of 2007, which wasn't even a category in Time Out Chicago. They dragged cast members of mine.
Oh my God.
The review was so mean, and they criticized all the wrong things. They criticized the set design. Obviously, our set design was bad. I produced it on no budget. They criticized the choreography. It was so mean. And then the play got into the New York Fringe, and the cast wanted to do it in New York, and it got 4 stars in Time Out New York, and they got what we were doing.
Awesome.
It was 12, 20-somethings doing a political satire in 2008. And it was really cool. And so it was a really good first experience in comedy because I got kicked while I was really, couldn't get out of bed for a week. I was so depressed. And then We put it up in New York, and the only thing we changed was we had this really great director named Scott Illingsworth come in, and he just like helped me really hone the satire. And the song at the end of the play we did in Chicago was like, we know this play may be a buzzkill, but donate to these local nonprofits. And then my friend Elia Einhorn, who's a musician, he co-wrote we rewrote the final song to be, instead of this apology, to be like, the whole song was just like selling the dolls, the girls were saying goodbye, but spelled B-U-Y, and they'd like B-U-Y in every language, and they were just like, buy stuff from us. It was like, I don't remember the song, but it was just very like in your face and unapologetic, and it was such a good lesson in terms of satire of like, don't apologize. Don't apologize for this like funny political satire maybe bumming some people out because it's about global disasters.
So this is like your first foray into like
that
political
was my
satire, right?
that was
like,
my first thing I did comedically.
That's awesome.
And I guess like, and everything I've done since, from the Daily Show to BORAT, is kind of in that vein.
I was gonna say there's like it seems like almost like a clear. I feel like nobody ever thinks about it like long term, but there is like sometimes like a weird clear path of like, oh yeah, this thing led to this thing, led to this thing.
Yeah. Which led me here.
Yeah, which led you here. Welcome. Okay, so Letterman was first, right, before Daily Show. Mm-hmm. So how did that job come about?
Wyatt Cenac, actually. I had
cool.
I had a live show in Chicago and then New York called like Entertaining the Bartender. It was Entertaining Julia, who was my friend who was a bartender. And then when we moved it to New York, it was Entertaining the Bartender. It was just a live show. I think I met a lot of comedians through that. Wyatt was one of them. I was at Letterman, and he was like, a job at the Daily Show opened up. It's a field producer job, which you're essentially like a writer and director for field pieces. And I was just like, I don't know what that means, and I'm not a producer, I'm a comic. And he was like,
nobody really ever knows what anything means until you're.
That's true, until you're in it. Until you're in it.
Exactly.
But I didn't know that you were literally like writing and directing these segments, and it was like film school for me. So I got that job, and it was like one of the best jobs I've ever had. I learned so much. The show that I had on AMC Plus would not have been what it was if I didn't have that experience, like producing those segments of The Daily Show. And also, when you learn how to produce as a comic, you learn how to think like a producer. So with BORAT, being in a writer's room, but knowing how to execute things really helped a lot too.
And I'm really curious about BORAT, because like BORAT is like, obviously you have this political satire, there's a lot going on there. And like, what was that process? Like, how did that process differ from like Daily Show, for example?
In broad strokes, I mean, the Daily Show was a Daily Show. So, but we were in the field department, so you're working on, our segments were like, it would take a couple weeks from like, you pitch it to Jon, and then he says, I like these ideas, I don't like these ideas, with the ideas that he likes. Then you're working with an associate producer, who can we book to help us make this segment, and then you just kind of have more meetings with Jon, as if you're in development on a project. You have like your pitch meeting, and then you have your treatment, and then as people come into play of who you're booking, like their conversations. Nobody would be upset about me saying this. I don't know if it's 100%. I think this happened. I don't know if I would need to like check with Brendan Schroff, but I believe that there was a segment on like high schools or a middle school election, and they were looking to like, this wasn't my segment, but they were like booking like the cast of characters or who we're going to interview, and somehow this random woman's name came up, and it was this woman named Kellyanne Conway, and I think Jon looked at her, and he was like, she's too out there, I don't know if she'll be taken seriously, so like they picked someone else to interview for like the kind of like segment that was like a little more like gotcha-y, and then Trump happened. We should have had Kellyanne on camera.
That's his history. Yeah, that's crazy.
But those were like, Jon was very, very involved in all those field segments. And then you go out and you shoot something, and you have almost like a script when you go out to shoot it. And then obviously everything changes, but the more prepared you are, the better the segment's going to be, and the more material you have. And then you work with an editor. And Jon would come in and give notes all the time, and it was a really cool experience, and it was scary because like I love Jon, and working for him was so great, but you're like, oh, I better get this shot, like it's on the shot list, like he's
like a legend. It's like
I can't let him down, you know?
Yeah, I went to college for journalism. That was like the show I watched. Because like I did comedy improv just like you, like on the side, but like journalism was like a thing, and like that is the
Journalism
midpoint.
was a thing.
Yeah,
Wait,
it was
so
a
you
thing.
you studied
It was a
journalism in
thing.
college?
I did, and
Oh, wow.
political science minor, and so that was like. But I also
Where
did,
were
like,
you and where did you study journalism?
Emerson College in
Oh,
Boston.
cool.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so for me, like Jon Stewart, Colbert Report were like the things I watched. Like that was
Right.
like perfect midpoint of like finding a story, figuring out the structure of the story, but then also finding the comedic moments of it, or finding the satire, or finding what made it funny. And so like that was like legend status for me. So working on that is like this like the coolest thing possible.
Yeah, the first month I was working for John, I was like so nervous.
Yeah, I'd be so
'Cause,
scared.
Yeah.
But yeah, he's truly one of the biggest legends. And so just going to BORAT, I did have a couple questions about BORAT because like I also do I love character performance and I love character things in general, and I'm really curious just because like the way in which comedy world is now, like do you feel like comedy performance and people that do character performance, do you feel like people who do characters, is that like sort of on the way out? Like I feel like stand up, I know you do stand up as well. Like stand up is like such a prevalent thing, and it's become sort of like the focus of like the comedy world to most people. And I'm curious how you feel about that sort of shift.
I can't tell.
Yeah.
I can't tell. I have no idea what's going on right now.
Yeah.
I don't know if everything is podcasts.
What's
I
that?
don't know if everything's TikTok.
Yeah.
I know that like I've been posting some of my videos from 2017 on Instagram.
Yeah.
And people had never seen them, and I've had this happen twice where someone has been like, oh, that's a joke from this person. Like you stole a joke from this person, the same joke. The joke is I'm half man on my dad's side, whatever. It's a dumb joke, but from this set that I did in 2017 or 2018. And then the person that they'll tag is somebody who like graduated college in 2023, who's like had like. I was like, you were like 14 when I wrote that joke? Like, and then people will be like, actually, that's her. But it's like, it's this thing of like, oh, if you don't put your stuff online, then like, it's a tree, if a tree falls in the woods.
Yeah.
So I'm like, oh, I guess I have to put my old bits online so that people know that I've done comedy.
Yeah, I mean, how do you feel about this sort of like TikTok comedy of it all?
I'm fine with anything. I don't have any.
Like, I feel like there was a shift. Like, I know, like, I came to be between Vine and TikTok, so I was like in that lucky little period where I was like, thank God I don't have to do stuff.
I think it's weird that kids
Yeah.
are getting their news from TikTok, and weird is an
That's-
understatement.
yeah.
I think it's scary for our democracy that you, like, you know, there are some places where gatekeepers are good. And I think in terms of disseminating information, it's like nice to actually have people who have studied journalism or who understand how to quote someone or source someone or fact check, being the people who are like driving information. I think it's really scary that a lot of people just, and I actually like, I had an experience where the only time I've ever gotten my news from TikTok, I fully like, I don't know if the word is red pilled myself, but it was when Kate Middleton was like disappeared.
yeah.
And I was like, you know what, I'm just gonna like, throw caution into the wind and see what happens. And I was on TikTok for 2 days, and I fully convinced myself that Prince William killed Kate because she had an affair with like his like friend or some, I don't even know.
I've gone down, yeah.
And then this woman who was like the person I was following on TikTok died.
Oh, that also happened during the pandemic. That I feel like that happened a lot, where I'd be like,
Kylie
it's so
something.
invested.
I don't remember her name, but I was like, wait, what? And then I just like I was like, I can't. I don't want to think about this. Like, Kate has cancer, and it's really sad for her family, and like, I don't need to be like on TikTok but it felt like a conspiracy theory that was like harmless because I live in the U.S. and it's not like messing with our election, and it's not like raising the temperature in a violent way. It was just, it kind of felt like a harmless guilty pleasure to like, you know, and I also wanted to get into the mind of somebody, and I'll tell you, TikTok was really good at being like, you like this video, here's another one.
Well, yeah, the algorithm is, I mean, I found one dude during the pandemic that I was obsessed with, but the whole idea was he would tell people he came from the future because he had predicted like COVID and he knew it was gonna happen and he knew Trump was gonna be elected, all this stuff. And it was like really intense, just like, and people would question him every day, but then you just kind of followed him because you're like, this guy genuinely believes he's from the future.
Right.
So we'll let this ride out. And it was like 8 months of like him saying things and being like,
he was mentally ill.
I don't know. No, it gets weirder. I thought that at one point, and I was like, oh man, like this is bad. Like, and then he was like, oh yeah, my wife lives in the future and she hates that I'm here and whatever. And then, unprompted after 8 months, all of the videos went down and one video went up with a link to a SoundCloud. And he goes, by the way, I'm a rapper. Check out my music. Like it was like one of the most elaborate bits, I
that's
think,
great.
of all time. But it was like 8 months of this. And he had like maybe at one point like 88,000 followers and like everybody was watching his lives.
I mean, but that's also sad. That's like what artists have to do to get attention now because people
I
don't
guess,
care about.
Or he was just having a lot of fun. I
Maybe,
can't tell. 'Cause,
but
like,
I can see like
yeah.
a conversation of like you have an album about to drop, you need like a social media presence, you need
That's
to figure
true.
out a weird hook. Like people don't.
The
It's not about your
8-month-long
music
con,
anymore.
yeah.
It's not about your comedy. It's about like people's parasocial relationships with you, how they feel about you, if you feel like a friend of theirs, or if you feel like someone that they're interested in. I think that's like where a shift that's happened. And I don't want to sound old. I don't feel old, but like it used to really just be like about like the body of work, and now it's about so much more. And I think part of the reason is because like our communities are dissolving and we're like isolated from friends and family and each other. And so like we look to like influencers, tastemakers, celebrities as like our friends and like who we want to support in a friend way, but they're not our friends. And I miss it being more about the actual art. And I don't know if
Yeah.
that just makes me sound old.
No, not at all. I mean, I love, like, even live performance now. It's like, it's not just about, like, oh, I did stand-up live or I did a show live. It's like you have to figure out so many other skills of, like, well, yes, I did this show live, but now I need, like, a 2-minute clip for this, or I need, like, a 5-minute clip for this so that people
Yeah.
see it, and then more people come to the show. And there's, like, you almost have to become, like, a marketing genius on top of
Yes.
just being a creative, which is, like, to me, the trickiest thing, obviously. But then on top of that, it's like you also have to be comfortable putting those videos out there. Like, yeah, you're putting, like, these stand-up clips from 2017, and I'm sure there's always this, like, feeling of, like, is this gonna work? Is this gonna hit? Like, I know I'm so uncomfortable putting videos out. Like, I'm like, I don't know, man. Like, the 11th hour as I'm about to post it, I'm like, I didn't like that joke, take it down, you know?
Oh, I mean, I'm like, I don't care. I
Really?
just, at this
See,
point,
I wanna get there. That would be cool.
well, you get there from just having like 15, like just from being a little dead inside. Like,
Yeah.
I miss caring. I'm just like, I don't need hair and makeup. I don't know. I'm just like, I don't need to be funny. Like, people don't know me and I don't need to be funny, but I should try.
Yeah, I guess with, like, character stuff, it's like, I mean, I do love the sort of renaissance of character stuff with TikTok. There are a lot of people doing characters, and I almost kind of envy them because in live shows, it's like you have to walk around with all these wigs and like costumes.
Right.
And then you're doing shows with stand-ups where it's like they can just go up and chill and be themselves and do their thing, and you're like, all right, just so everybody knows, I'm gonna do 7 minutes of characters, and I
Is
have
that-
12 wigs.
Are you a character comic?
I was in the past. I have been, and I still do sometimes. But I figured out how to do much more mellow things. Like I
Right.
figured out how to do it with like no costumes. But for a while, I was like.
Costumes.
Every girl I ever dated was like, you have a million wigs in this one
Right.
closet. What is this? And I'm like, don't look in there. You know? It's
Who were you, like, what inspired that?
Weirdly, people like, I mean, I loved Borat. Like, Borat
Borat.
was a big thing for me. Like, Ollie G show was a big thing for me. Like, I know Jim Carrey and Robin Williams weren't necessarily character performers, but those were dudes that were very physical and did characters. Like,
Yeah,
their
yeah,
movie
yeah.
was a character. And I think, like, being Latino or, like, you know, being Puerto Rican and having learned Spanish before I learned English, I think, like, physical comedy and things like that are kind of universal.
Yes.
Where it's like my grandma knows Jim Carrey so well, knows Robin Williams so well, but like if you give her any stand-up comic or every comic from now, she's like, I have no idea who the hell that is. And my uncles exclusively quote Borat, and that movie came out God knows how long, you know?
Yeah.
Like every time I walk in, they're like, what's up, Vanilla Face? You know, it's like it's always like the same jokes. They've never progressed past that because it was like so funny to them.
Yeah.
Like the foreign part of it or the physical part of it or like the insanity of it. And so like I think I always gravitated towards that because I was like, oh, it's accessible. It's like super accessible to my own family. But then you start doing it, and it's like the practicality of it. Doing it all the time is hard. Like
If it's not your thing, like,
Yeah.
you know, some people feel the most comfortable in a character.
oh, I do. That's the issue. I've never
Right.
done stand up. I never will. It scares the shit out of me.
Oh,
yeah.
yeah.
It's weird. It's like I go from being like 12 different things to like, okay, now I got to be chill as Marcos.
Right.
And if you don't like Marco, because if you don't like the character, I can be like, well, you didn't like the character. But if you don't like me talking, then I'm like,
Yes.
uh-oh, you know?
Yeah.
It's
I
like
can
that
see that.
scary sinking, like, well, if, you know, it's like that review you got. It's like, oh, dude. And then you don't know how to dig yourself out of it.
Well, you just do it, right?
That's
the best
true.
advice I ever got professionally, and it was totally from my agent, just like reading off his Nike, was just do it.
Oh my God.
Just
Unintentionally
do it,
the
you
best
know?
advice.
And you just do it, and if people don't like it, they don't like it.
Yeah.
Some people do like it, and you just keep doing it, and hopefully you get opportunities to do it. And I think with social media, at least it's giving people opportunities, maybe unpaid, but then it's just that's like the one I would say. I would have said this before, like it was actually, I mean, there was a moment, and the moment was like when Funny or Die came onto the scene, when I was like, oh, social media is awesome. Like it is it's taking away the gatekeepers. It's allowing cool content to get out there. It's giving people that would not have had the opportunity to put stuff out there an opportunity to put stuff out there. And that was the era of, I think, MySpace as well. It was a cool time. And it's funny to have like that tech optimism, like, yeah, and President Obama, you know, like we were all just like, oh my God, technology is good. And now I think completely the opposite. I'm like, I would rather have never had a career in comedy than be in the moment that we're in where like, you know, ChatGPT is like ruining writing and we all might just be like killed by like AI and like, you know.
Yeah, AI is gonna end the world. I'm fully on board with that.
I don't know how to.
I guess like on a lighter note, I guess like that was such a great period, and I think there is like pros and cons of now. Obviously, more cons than pros to me, but
I don't think there are any pros.
no pros. You haven't seen like any like comedian or something that you found via TikTok.
It doesn't
where like,
matter.
oh, this person's like really good.
Who cares?
Yeah.
If you're in line at like Delta and you can't get home for 4 days because there's just like tech outages.
Yeah, that's fair.
Like it doesn't matter if somebody's like good on Instagram and maybe making money doing it.
I guess that is true.
I just
mean,
don't.
that's like the
I don't
comedy
see
TV writing of it all. I have that like
benefits of social media or the internet. I don't anymore. I don't see. I'd like to be proven wrong.
But
I did meet my husband online.
Okay, boom, giant pro. That's a giant pro.
I
feel like
love him.
There is like that meta question.
But
though.
I'd rather my child, like, you know, live in a world without AI.
Yeah. Or is your child like disallowed from social media? Are they allowed to have social media?
He's 2.
Oh, okay. So yeah, probably not.
So
then,
he's
right?
got his own TikTok.
Oh, so he's got his own TikTok.
No, you know what's so sad? Like if I put him on TikTok, like literally, like it's so funny because my husband's a musician and I'm a comedian, and like if we just like put our son on TikTok, like being pawed at by a dog, it would get so many more views than like the two of us have ever gotten in our lives with like really great content.
Yeah.
It's just like what people want. They just want like babies and animals.
So jumping into like the sort of next stage of career, this sort of like true story, Indefensible.
Oh, the title's crazy, and it's just it's a whole long story, but it was a.
Well, I was just curious, like how you got there from like.
So I was literally making
comedy.
fun of
Yeah.
true crime on Conan. I was making fun of true crime. I was like, true crime is the only time the entertainment industry will take a chance on an unknown female lead. You know, I was like, this industry is fraught and creepy, and I was making fun of it. And then somebody at AMC Plus was like, do you think we could do comedic true crime? And I was like, no, this is exploitative and wrong and psychotic. And then the pandemic happened, and all my work dried up, and I was like, let me revisit.
By the way,
how we can do this. And like to their credit, like we found a format that worked because we did it in the most ethical way that we could, but we were also like, it wasn't about the murder. It was about like broadening out and seeing how an injustice happens, and then finding people who would talk to us who you could hold accountable, like the prosecutor's office that used junk science to get an innocent guy in prison for life. He sat down with me. Or like the defense attorney who got a guy off of murder charges because he convinced the jury that this woman choked on the guy's dick, when in reality, that's not how somebody dies. Like there are so many horrible jokes you can make about like a grandma choking on a dick, but the reality was like the only way that defense worked was because like juries are sexist, and they were able to like use like a consent defense to sow doubt with the jury. We talked to a medical examiner who was like, you can't choke on a dick. It's just not possible. Yeah. And like we talked to the granddaughter of this poor victim, and it was heartbreaking. But then like we also talked to the defense attorney, and I was like, how do we make this segment not a commercial for the defense attorney? How do we show that these are like things that happen all the time, and they just need, like this defense just needs, it's called the rough sex defense or consent defenses. They just need to be outlawed. And we did this interview, and it was weirdly funny because like I was able to ask this guy, and a lot of it was improvised, but a lot of it was planned. But at one point I was just trying to understand, like, I was like, have you ever sucked a dick? And the defense attorney's like, I don't want to. And then I was like, I'm sorry, I don't mean to slut shame you. That's your job, you know, like, because that's what he did to the victim. He slut shamed this dead woman. Sorry, I get like upset about even thinking about this episode, but I'm also amazed that this network took a chance on us and let us do this and let us like add comedic moments into this horrific story to just kind of be like the sugar to coat what we were trying to say to people. So like, that's how I got from comedy to true crime.
Yeah, you're really passionate about it. Is there like a... No, I mean, I'm just like hearing you out. It's like, I think it's like really interesting. There's like a different feeling when you're like doing something like that, where it's like, okay, you're unearthing something or like trying to bring truth to light.
Well,
Like,
because you meet these people's families, and then
Yeah.
you're like, I have to. This segment has to be good because I like sat down with this woman's granddaughter, and I just want to like do right by her. So you're like, oh my God, yeah, like this has to be good, and we have to like not make this an advertisement for this guy who's coming on thinking he's going to get more clients. We talked to this like grizzled cop who was like, this is the only way. Everybody knows that in a sex crime you use a consent defense. It doesn't take a rocket scientist. Like, she's like, this is just what everyone does. So then it takes it off this guy and makes it more about like the system that allows this stuff to keep happening. So I've been very lucky with being able to do stuff like that. But it's also, you know, it's all connected. It still has like kind of comes from like a comedic place, even though it's like murder.
yeah. And in doing that, do you think that there's ever like, would you do another like Borat, or would you do like something in the it's sort of?
I
are
mean,
you,
I'm
like,
doing everything, clearly.
yeah. But I'm just curious. I'm like, you know, they're just such different vibes. So I'm curious. It's like
You
once
do
you're in
anything,
that sort of
you
thing,
can,
yeah.
because you have a kid now.
That's
You
true.
just have to do everything.
I don't have a kid, but
And,
yeah.
well, then you can take more risks, you know? But like, I mean,
Yeah.
I got really lucky because AMC Plus was really cool with allowing us to do what we wanted to do. And the reason for that was also because I had had training at The Daily Show and credibility. But like when you're starting out, if this is who's watching this, if it's like young comics starting out and trying to figure out like how to exist in this world, I mean, you take every opportunity that you're offered and you learn from it. And you know, like that's kind of how I've gotten to where I've gotten, you know? But there's no roadmap.
Well, that and the just do it. That's like the other.
And just
yeah,
do
and just
it.
do it. That's the ideal. Okay, so before we wrap up, I have some speed round, 20 questions.
Bring it.
I gotta sit up for this. Let's do it. All right. Least favorite job you've ever had?
I worked as a management consultant, which on the company pen it said delivering innovative solutions that endure. I still don't know what it means, but that was my first job out of college.
Okay, most used emoji. That one? Is that excited or anxious? I'm really curious.
It's just my vibe, and I heard like I don't know if that's the one that they're like millennials use this emoji. Is it or
really?
it's like this one?
I always use that as like anxious, but other people are like, "You're really excited for what?" And I'm
No,
like,
it's
"No, I'm
never
like anxious."
excited. It's like I'm gonna tell you something I feel weird about. Or,
Okay,
like,
to describe the emoji, it's the emoji that's just like
oh,
that.
for the listeners, it's the teeth clenched emoji. It's the I'm not on Lexapro emoji.
Yeah, you're smiling, but your like lips are up. They're like,
Yeah, it's like I have an undiagnosed anxiety disorder, which is partly what accounts for my edge in comedy.
What kind of phone was your first cell phone?
I mean, I think it was either like a BlackBerry. I had a Trio. I worked as a consultant, so I had those
Oh yeah,
weird
very
phones.
business.
Yeah.
BlackBerry. First celeb crush.
Luke Perry, who I wrote him a letter and I spelled it Luck, Luck Perry. Also, I don't know if like David Koresh would count, but I don't know if he'd count as a celebrity, but I read his like Waco Inside the Cult biography, and he's a horrible, horrible cult leader, but I had a crush on him.
But there's a reason that cult
aesthetically.
leaders are like always hot.
Yeah,
right? That's a
I
good
thought
thing.
he kind of looked like a musician that I would dated in the mid-aughts, you know, but as a 10-year-old, I thought he was cute.
Oh, last movie that made you cry.
I saw The Land Before Time on a plane, but
Oh my
any
God.
movie I see on a plane.
Recently?
This is so dark. We didn't even get to this. My mom died when I was pregnant. So
I'm so sorry.
mom's dying, which I didn't realize every animated show,
Every
single one has
Every
the
Disney
mom
movie,
dying.
yeah.
So my son and I were on a plane, and I was like, let's watch something. And The Land Before Time came on, and like the mom dies in the first minute, which also in like everything else, the mom,
Bambi. Yeah,
all
you
of
can list
them.
them all. Yeah.
yeah. And so I was like bawling, and my
Distraught.
husband just changed it.
Never mind. Yeah. Favorite website that no longer exists or is dead?
MySpace.
MySpace?
I'm
yeah?
not gonna say the one I told you about in the green room.
Okay,
because
fair.
I think it might make me seem like a sociopath.
Do you know what a JoJo Siwa is?
Yeah, it's orange juice and cream, like
Perfect.
a mix they sell at the mall.
Yeah, nailed it. Best fast food and what's your order? Like best fast food restaurant.
Wawa Hoagie, Philly. I'm from there.
Damn, you got that one dead
Yeah,
on. Hell
Wawa's
yeah.
the
Wawa
best.
Philly hoagie, boom.
Turkey hoagie with lettuce, tomato, sometimes onions, if I'm not like hanging out with anyone, oregano, a little bit of oil, no vinegar.
You were locked and loaded for that one. If you could meet any comedian, dead or alive.
David Letterman.
Amazing.
I never met him. No, I did. That was
Never
a
met
joke.
him. He was
That was
just
a
there.
joke. But I met him once.
And he was chill?
I met him on my first day. He asked me if I wanted a lollipop before my interview, and I was
Okay.
like,
Was that a test? Was it like if you take the lollipop, you're out?
no, I
we'll
think it
never
was like
know.
if you take the lollipop, you'll be head writer.
Oh.
But yeah, he was like, "This is a terrible place to work, but it'll look great on your resume." No, who would I want to Mae West? No, Mae West, but also Elaine May. I really would love to meet Elaine May, but I also know that she's old and would just be like annoyed probably.
All-time favorite comedy movie?
So I married an ex-murderer, The Wedding Singer, Annie Hall. Sorry, but Annie Hall is.
Sorry.
I mean, I'm
They're all
just gonna
classics.
pretend that
Yeah.
that's Marshall Brickman's masterpiece. Annie Hall is maybe my favorite movie.
I threw this one in. Animation or real people?
Real people.
Okay, fair. Nobody likes animation. If you got cast in a biopic, who would you be playing? Like if it was like you played
Amanda
the titular role.
Knox.
Amanda Knox? Amazing.
Not by choice, but
Not
I
by
feel
choice, I
like,
just
well,
have
maybe
to.
not anymore. I feel like there's a moment where I'm actually friendly with her, by the way.
Oh,
She's
cool.
lovely. That's my celeb I'm name dropping. But my dad used to think I looked like Leonardo DiCaprio when I was younger. Like, I don't know. I'm just going by who people think I look like.
Oh, describe your sense of humor in 2 words.
I didn't call my book not funny, so.
So it's not funny. Sense of humor, not funny?
Yeah.
Okay, fair. Okay, so plugs. Anything you want to plug?
I hope I have something to plug, but I won't yet. So maybe what you can do
Edit it in.
is deep fake me saying, I'll do it one more time for safety.
Yep.
So, what do I have to plug? Thank you for asking. I am plugging, hey, can you guys check out? Okay. Hopefully it'll be like a couple projects that I'll just, fall, whatever.
Thank you so much to Jena Friedman for joining us. Please remember to rate, review, and subscribe. Follow us for more content at Funny or Die.
Are the
And
comments going to be on or off?
I think they'll be on. They'll be on. Is that bad?
For me, I'm sure.
We'll go back and do it. We'll tape another with the comments
No,
and talk
fine.
about the comments.
Say whatever you want. I don't care. I'm not talking about you. I'm talking about you.
And a final question.
I'm
Internet.
picturing like a little skinny guy jerking off in his mom's basement.
No.
Come at me. Literally.
Okay, so one word answer.
That's actually not to be weird, but that is my target demo.
Target demo is skinny little guys in their basements.
Yeah, Adult Swim. Adult Swim.
I
boys.
really don't know. Maybe it's good to know your demo. I don't know
My
my
demo is kids who would have been school shooters, but there was some parental intervention, and then they're just kind of angry comedy nerds.
See, if I had to guess, I think my demo is old Latina women. I don't know why.
That's a good demo.
They love me.
That's
they
a good demo.
love me. I don't know why.
I shouldn't be saying my demo is aspiring school shooters while I perform live, so maybe we'll cut that. My demo is, kids, aspiring school shooters who were taught how to meditate. And
We're
then-
taught how to meditate?
Well, they're not school shooters because they were taught how to meditate.
Oh, okay.
I don't know. Maybe that's not funny. Which is also stop, Jenna. Stop. I'm telling myself to stop. Go ahead. What were you saying?
Final question. Internet, good or bad?
Bad.
Bad.
I think so.
Is there a reason? You want to jump in?
Well, if the internet has saved someone's life, I'm sorry, for saying it's bad.
Fair. Thank you so much for watching. We'll catch you next time.